Welcome once again back to the lab. It is your old Professor Pilk, and a lot of you guys have asked me to do a deeper dive into the Pokemon Legends ZA basically trailer that they dropped the other day, so to speak. Trailer it was more of a teaser, and we'll talk about this in depth here. We'll have a deep discussion about this because I think it warrants a little bit more than we discussed the other day. But before I get into that, let me just say, if this is your first time on the channel, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys like the video, and while we were pretty critical of this the other day, the reality is I love this trailer, and I am really stoked about this. Now, I do have my reservations about it, and we'll talk about that, but the one thing I didn't talk about the other day is the fact that while we didn't get the Classic Collection and all those other things we were really hyped and excited for, two things. Number one, next year's the 30th anniversary of Pokemon's games in Japan. So while this makes, a lot of us unhappy to not see what we were hoping and wanted to see, the reality is it makes sense. Pokemon's 30th is when they probably should be releasing those other really big, crazy events. That just makes more sense. So things like the Classic Collection, the remakes, all that kind of stuff would make more sense next year. And I still would like to believe that with Legends ZA, we will probably see the X and Y, especially things we know out of this, strictly Lumio City being the setting for Legends ZA. So I would think the X and Y remakes should be at least not that far behind, and maybe they just had some development issues or things like that. It's hard to tell. But in reality, the other thing that's nice about that is not getting the Classic Collections means that Pokemon Bank probably got a stay of execution. And I'm good with that because I'm still working on my Shiny Living deck, so I'm trying to get every Shiny Pokemon from the earliest iteration possible, i.e. I have the Galarian version of Mr. Mime and Mr. Rhyme Shiny because I farmed up enough Mime Juniors in the original games to evolve them in the Galar region. I just did that the other day on stream. So I am still working on that project. It's a very extensive project. It takes forever to pull those off. Some of those mon are not even, easily obtainable. So that is kind of how we're handling that situation. But having a little more time for that is quite nice, but I'm not going to take forever. I do want to kind of get those out pretty quick, so we may do some extra streams on that. There may be some TikTok exclusive streams and things like that. But that's neither here nor there. Let's jump into Legends Z. That's what most of you guys are here for. Let's talk about this because there is a ton to discuss. So first things first, I am going to have the audio cut off just because I don't want to get dinged by Pokemon. That's a great way for them to come after us, and I don't want to deal with that. So right out of the gate, we see a lot of stuff here. We see a lot of Pokemon that are going to be in the game to start with. Those versions of Vermilion that I said Vermilion, that's the city. Anyway, you get the idea. Pavilion. So we see some Pokemon. Early clues as to what we can kind of expect. Now, here's the thing. We saw in the trailer that there's going to be ways to get to the rooftops and things like that. So we will be able to have really extensive, without it being like super open world. Pardon me. I'm getting over a little bit of an illness there. Without it being super open world, we'll still have a lot of terrain and a lot of things that we can explore, and it's going to be a lot of fun seeing all that. So as you can see here, over here in the scaffolding has like ramps and things. So you'll be able to run up there. We saw that there's going to be elevators to get rooftops and all that kind of stuff. And there will be Pokemon in rooftops and a lot of that. Now this comes at a minor disadvantage to the hardware, but we'll get to that here in a moment. Let's get a little further in there. Looks like you'll be able to like holographically. There will be like holographic, projections of different people around town, probably your NPCs telling you where to go and what to do. Check out the Pokemon Center. So just kind of like, let's go back here to the Pokemon Center for a moment. Just like in Scarlet and Violet, the Pokemon Center is like this big open area where you can go in and heal your mana and do whatever. So that's quite nice. I like that a lot. Back on a Larvitar. I love that that Trubbish is chilling. So Trubbish and Garbodor kind of come from like a bit of Japanese mythology where if something is just kind of like lays there long enough, it can become sentient. And I love the fact that they just kind of seem to be spawned from the rubbish just here in the alleyway. I like that. I mean, number one, that's where they would hang out. Number two, it just kind of harkens back to kind of their origins. So I do like that a lot. A lot of NPCs. So one thing we didn't get a lot of in Legends Arceus was just general NPCs. But in Legends Arceus, people were afraid of the Pokemon for the most part. Like, you resolved a lot of that for them. Pokemon were very mysterious, very dangerous, things like that. Also, I realized I didn't mirror my camera, so I'm looking over there on your screen. It is right here, and I apologize. The starters. So we've learned a little bit about why these starters are where they are. Chikorita, Tepig, and Totodile. So I don't think we saw ever their fully evolved forms. So it's highly likely we might see regional forms here. The main reason they were chosen, apparently, is because they've never had any regional form or any, like, real extraneous love outside of their original versions. So, yeah, throughout this, I don't think you ever see them fully evolved. I think we will always see them in their smallest form. And if I recollect back to Scarlet and Violet, they did the same thing to do a final reveal of their larger evolutions. So I'm expecting, and once again, maybe I'm over-expecting, I'm expecting a regional form here. I'm expecting something specific to this version of the game, like a Lumiose form or something like that, where they evolve in the city, or because this is clearly, like, futuristic, because, I mean, look how old AZ looks. He looks, I mean, number one, he got a haircut. He looks quite disheveled and aged. He didn't look young in the older games. I mean, the dude's been around for eons. But he, well, I'm trying to think how long he's been around. A couple hundred years, something like that. I don't remember the exact age. But nevertheless, like, when we first met him, he was an old dude. But he looks pretty aged here. So I'm kind of expecting more of, like, his story and things like that. When this game first dropped, I figured when the ZA was an allusion to him and to Zygarde, and we'll actually see Zygarde cells around town coming up here shortly. So I'm looking forward to more of that. I'm sure with him being basically your innkeeper, he's like the version of your mom in this game, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of story from him. So that is one thing I'm very much looking forward to. And his Floettes here, which is really nice. Okay, here's your rival. And basically it's going to depend on, you know, which gender you choose in the game. There he is. Look how tall he is. Oh, and I just realized his hair is I watched the trailer and I never noticed that his hair is actually tied in the back. He's got it in a ponytail. So that's interesting. But when we met him in X and Y, I don't remember walking with a cane. So I think, honestly, we're going to get just a little bit more story. And if I recollect, I think he was walking upright. I'd have to go back and play the game. It's been a minute since I played it. I want to remember him walking upright, not using a cane. So I'm guessing we're going to get some more of that. This is essentially just... I'm taking this as, like, the Chairman Rose of this story. That's kind of how the vibe she's giving me. You know, it is what it is. I know that's not X and Y centric, but that's just the general vibe I'm getting from her. And I get the feeling that, like, this dude does not give me, like, good guy vibes. That's just me. And she's got something a little more shady going on. So, I'm just gonna call it now. There's gonna be, like, a plot twist with her, 100%. Yeah, so that once again, there's our starters, and they have not evolved yet. So, yeah. Now, basically, the way they're going to do this, you see this gate here. This is a virtual gate into their version of the wild area, if you recollect that from Sword and Shield. And if you ever played that game. Essentially, this is where you're going to be able to go catch Mon. And it looks like in a semi or uninhabited part of town. And essentially, you're going to be able to go in there, catch Mon at will. They're just kind of everywhere and just kind of doing their own thing. So it almost, I mean, the grass is longer. There are NPCs here. But I'm going to gather, I mean, based on this car that's just kind of like parked weird, and there's just Mon everywhere, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of people. I'm going to guess this is a part of town that's less inhabited. And they did mention that they're doing some, like, urban reconstruction in here. So it's highly likely that part of our story is going to be parts of the town where maybe the Pokemon have taken over. Maybe there's something going on with the Megas, kind of like we had with Gigantamax and Sword and Shield. I am getting a lot of Sword and Shield vibes here, but I also am, like, in the middle of doing that. So maybe that's just, I don't know. I'm in the middle of my decks there. I'm about 50% of the way through the decks currently on that one. So maybe I'm just reading a bit too much into that because that's what I'm used to playing at the moment. The battle system. Oh, man. So you can see the Legends Arceus kind of vibes here. Arceus, whatever you want to say. I say Arceus. There you see the kind of similar like layout here. I don't know if we're going to get the strong moves, the weak moves. I don't know if we're going to get any of that stuff, the agile moves. I don't know if we're going to get any of that. But there is a bunch to kind of take away from this. But the honest answer here is I love the battle system. It looks really cool. And it looks like with Legends Arceus, those huge changes that they had to the battle system over there were very welcome and very cool. And I like this a lot. And as you'll see later on, you can actually dodge. You can roll out of the way. It seems like your character will take damage just like in Legends Arceus. And yeah, the battle system looks very exciting, very fresh, and something that, frankly, the franchise needs in what I would argue. So I think at this point, the Legends series is like their flagship series. Dare I say that? It is definitely not for everyone. It's not. It's a more difficult game. It takes a little bit more skill to play. Then you have the core games, which everyone kind of calls those are the generational games. We just had Scarlet and Violet. We had Sword and Shield prior to that. You know, those are your generational games. They introduce a new generation of Pokemon. They introduce a new region. And they're for the average player. That's not... I don't want that to come across as like a negative thing. The average player is a good thing. That is the core audience. And then you've got like the Let's Go games, and you've got some like other just general break-off games. Shoot, for me personally, little fun addition of my collection. Check this out. Say what you will about the game itself, but I just got Rumble Blast on the 3DS. I found it sealed, still in box, so I'm going to keep this thing around for quite a few years, get it very well protected, and yeah, have this chilling for future generations. I think this is going to be a super fun addition to our collection. I have quite a few other sealed games that I'm just kind of protecting for my kids, or maybe even their kids, or whatever. I've got all the hardware, so, you know, why not? It seems like a fun thing to do. But getting back into Legends ZA specifically, because I will get off topic here. So we still only see the base level of the starters, and that to me says that there's the dodging mechanic. So you can kind of see how this all works down here. You have your 4. I'm gonna guess. Let's go back here for a second. I'm gonna gather that most likely this is either the D-pad, how you use the D-pad, and then you're gonna have to use the analog for motion. Or maybe even, like, these are the A, B, X, Y buttons. Being though they're on this side of the screen, it could go either way. But they do kind of look like they give me D-pad vibes. I could be wrong on that. But we'll see. We'll see. Should be very interesting. Some people have said this is not looking turn-based, and I see that. I do feel like it's a bit early for Pokemon to jump away completely from turn-based. But it might be a combination of, like, kind of like Legends Arceus was, where it wasn't completely turn-based. It was still based off the speed of the mon and all that, and how you did, like, your agile, your strong moves. There was still a turn-based to it, but it might be, like, somewhere between that and maybe, like, raids where there's, like, a timer. You know, I could see a number of situations, but I think this is going to be a segue between the old turn-based style and something a little more modern, and I'm very excited for that. I think that's really cool. And notice you see the different levels of the different mon here. So this is very much like Legends Arceus, where, I mean, this is what... Oh, no, never mind. That's Talonflame. I was thinking that was Pidgeotto. So that's actually his mon of all those different levels. But I still wouldn't be surprised if like Legends Arceus, you could have multiple Pokemon attacking simultaneously. That's what made that game really difficult. That made that game very, very difficult at times. The fact that other people could get involved in the battle, and you could potentially have some problems. So it just confused me because I see Hismon down here in this screen, but then in that other screen they were over on the side. Let's go take a look at that again. So there's Onyx. There we are. Oh, they're still down there at the bottom. So what was I seeing there? That was the first time I'd honestly noticed it. So, oh, that's when they're getting XP. Okay. So your monitor down here at the bottom, it looks like you might actually be able to... So maybe you could cycle through Mon with the trigger buttons. Potentially. Of course, Mega Evolutions are back. That's its own topic. Because we did not see any new Megas. And I think it goes without saying that we will probably see some Megas. We will probably get some Gen 10 Megas. Or Gen 10. Gen 9 Megas, sorry. Mega Absol, love Mega Absol. Kangaskhan. So Megas are back, but once again, that is really its own kind of discussion. Now here's the thing, guys. Some people were picking these scenes apart. Let me just say, these things look like scenes from the opening, right? These are not gameplay scenes. These are rendered for the... Let me just make an assertion here real quick. This is probably rendered on proper Switch hardware. I don't think this is rendered on Switch 2 dev kit or something like that. This is rendered at Switch level. You can see like there's some like pixelation in the art. So essentially, all this art here is rendered in 2D. They just make like some art in like Illustrator or Photoshop, and they then superimpose that on this texture for this mat here, and you can see by the way that it is rendered, it's definitely not on newer hardware. This is on older hardware or on something emulating older hardware. But I don't think this is on Switch 2 hardware. And they are currently right now advertising this game for the Nintendo Switch. This is a great way to segue into this discussion. So, for those that didn't see the last video, there was a fairly heated debate in the comments section about the hardware versus the game development. Let's be realistic about the Nintendo Switch right now. The Nintendo Switch is a more than 10-year-old system. The Integra, the NVIDIA Tegra chip that they're using in the original Nintendo Switch was released in January of 2015. Now, I want you to bear in mind, that is a mobile chip. It is based on ARM architecture. I'm not getting into what all that means. Basically, it is a chip that you would have in your phone, or my phone screen is filthy. I'm very sorry. Playing my phone a lot. Or on like a tablet or something like that. In fact, it's what NVIDIA put in their tablet. I want you to think about how far phones have come in 10 years. My phone is, I want to say, like 6 years old, and it is insanely ahead of the phones that we had 4 years prior, and insanely behind phones that we have today. So consider that the technological leaps we have had in 10 years in mobile hardware. Maybe not PCs. If you're thinking PCs haven't come very far. Moore's Law is a thing of the past, if you know what that is. That is done. You know, probably now with quantum computing and all that we're unlocking. That's its own crazy discussion. That won't be in gaming in for 20, 30 years. But the idea that this is representative of what the Switch 2 is capable of is, I just think, ridiculous. The game is designed for the Nintendo Switch, and I think that's the right move from Nintendo. Because remember, while we know the Switch 2 is coming out, and we know this game is coming out very late in the year, it is highly likely that what's happening here is Nintendo sees the writing on the wall. So, if you remember about 5 years ago, during 2020, the Nintendo Direct that was coming out, we had all these rumors, we had leaks of hardware, we had all kinds of crazy stuff about this quote-unquote Pro Switch system. And it didn't come anywhere. It didn't go anywhere at all. The Pro Switch turned out to just be like an OLED system that we got. However, there were actual pictures of hardware and things like that the developers were receiving. There were lots and lots of leaks. So, in my mind, games like the most recent entry to the Zelda series, Scarlet and Violet, and some of the other games that have massively suffered because the Switch is so ancient. I mean, it really, in video game hardware world, mobile hardware word, it is an ancient system. It is multiple generations behind what we have today and what the Switch 2 will likely represent. You are really talking about crazy capabilities with the new system versus what we can do with the old system. But in reality, with the Switch Pro falling apart and all this other hardware or all this other software likely being created on, specifically for the Switch Pro with backwards compatibility to the old Switch, I'm sure Nintendo, Game Freak to a lesser extent, has probably got cold feet about going full on adoption. Plus, you got to remember, new consoles, number one with new consoles, they're very hard to get year one. Very, very hard to obtain year one. Number two, we live in an era of scalpers. So we know that the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be bought en masse by scalpers. It's going to be impossible to get your hands on at market value. It is going to be next to impossible to acquire. I'm sorry, I hate to be realistic about it, but I'm going to be realistic about it. You and I'm going to be getting one, not guaranteed, but I'm going to do everything in my power to get one. Very, very, very unlikely that most people watching this will have theirs prior to the holiday season. Now, post-holiday, they'll be back down to market value. They'll be flooding the market with them, and everyone's going to basically be able to pick them up over the next 24 months at that point. But new hardware is very hard to come by. So if you're Game Freak, do you develop a game for the new hardware exclusively, or do you develop a game for the old hardware that everyone already has, that everyone can enjoy, that a lot of people got new for the first time just 2 months ago? Or do you go all in on the new hardware and literally cut down your target audience to like a handful of players? No, they're going to develop for the old hardware with compatibility for the new hardware. It just makes sense. I mean, it's good business. Plus, see, look what happened with the PS5. The PS5 was an abysmal launch because they launched at the wrong time. It's another reason why I feel like the Switch Pro probably didn't happen, because the Switch Pro very likely was, number one, Nintendo saw the chip shortages and everything caused by COVID. I mean, that was a very predictable situation. Many places in the world were shut down for months. There was no way manufacturers would be able to keep up with a new console at the time. Because of that, nobody could get their hands on PS5s. It took me I want to say a year and a half, 2 years to get my hands on one. And, sometimes as a content creator, I've got other avenues to make that happen. But a year and a half, guys. A year and a half. So the reality is PS5s were poorly released, poorly implemented, and because of that, game devs just weren't making exclusive games for that console. So consumer confidence is at a low. There are people that going forward will plus first-gen technology tends to be pretty bad compared to the later releases. I don't think the Switch had too many problems in that regard. Nintendo tends to be really good about testing their hardware, but in reality, it's very likely that there are people that are going to simply not. I'm trying to think how to word this. There are people that are just not going to buy the Switch 2 until it has been tested, until it's in the market, until it's, been through the ringer, and maybe it's a generation into the hardware. So, because there's always like we had with the OLED and things like that, usually a year or two in, there's a major revision on the hardware. So there are some people that just flat out are not going to buy the first generation hardware. And that is a legitimate take, especially when you've got games like this that are going to be on the old hardware. Yes, they'll be compatible with the new stuff. Reason I'm getting to all this is because if you're basing what you think this is going to perform like on the Switch 2 based on what we see here, you're barking up the wrong tree. I fully think that the Switch 2 implementation on this is going to be a lot like the emulation of Scarlet and Violet. A lot of people were very angry with the way Scarlet and Violet performed, rightfully so. The game was terrible at launch. It was shockingly bad at launch. But I've long said it was likely, number one, rush to market. They really needed another 6 months to a year on that one. Number two, probably made on the dev kits for the Switch Pro. So when it was implemented on classic Switches, you are seeing lots of anomalies that the players for the Switch Pro and for upgraded hardware would not see. Case in point, how well it performed on an emulator. But that's neither here nor there. I could rant on about that all day. I did want to touch on that. So I feel like this is all rendered on an original Switch, either emulation or hardware or some equivalent to that. I don't think this is how it's going to perform on a Switch 2. And I think for those people that are early adopters of the Switch 2, you're going to see a game that is significantly improved. Now, some people have pointed out how blocky the sprites look. To me, they look like the exact same sprites from Scarlet and Violet. I know Slurpuff wasn't there, but Dedenne and a bunch of the other Pokemon, literally, I mean, Gyarados, Inky, they look exactly the same as they would in a cutscene on the Scarlet and Violet games. Even the water textures and all that. I know people want an upgraded game, and I would love to say, yes, we got an awesome upgraded Legends game, but I think from a marketing standpoint, I will stand behind Nintendo releasing this for the Switch versus the Switch 2. Because if you wanted this for the Switch 2, you're waiting at least another year and a half before they could reasonably bring this to market and get the kind of sales numbers that they would want. Maybe in that point in time, we could get another Legends game, which would be really awesome. Now, for those of you that played Legends Arceus or whatever, here's a big clue as to some of the hidden gems that are going to be all about in this game. If you remember Legends Arceus, you can collect the wisps. Here, you can collect, looks like, Zygarde cells. So they're going to be hidden throughout the map, kind of like, I'm going to guess something like the wisps. I think less like unknowns in other games. I think more like wisps. I don't think you'll have to catch them. I think you just finding them is going to be more than enough. Or in Scarlet and Violet, the Gimmighoul coins. Very similar to that. And they do insinuate here in the next screen that essentially what's going to happen is when you collect those, you will probably be able to awaken different forms of Zygarde. So we see the, I forget what percentage it is, but the dog form of Zygarde. Maybe he was right before that. Where was he? I know we see him at some point. Maybe I passed him. Hard to tell. So there's a lot to be, and obviously this right here is going to be the map of the whole town. Now, if we go back through here, look at some of the gameplay. So these are all cutscenes. Let's get to the actual gameplay itself. The question becomes, how are they going to render all this out? Because with Scarlet and Violet, they're entering huge swaths of land with dozens of sprites, and that's a big drain on the hardware. If you go back and play Legends Arceus, they're very small sections of land, and it's broken up in such a way that when you travel to each one, there's a small cutscene, and then you kind of walk into a specific area. And I think that's how this is going to play out. So if you notice when you walk up here, that is definitely a cutscene. 100% a cutscene, and then you go into this wild area. Very clearly cutscenes, and they show you the different Mon that are around in the wild area and whatnot, and all of that. So I think from a gameplay standpoint, you're going to see that cutscene, and like it showed you there, you're going to kind of automatically run through the gate, and then it's going to open up into this miniature world. So it's not going to be nearly as open as Scarlet and Violet was. That is good. Don't get me wrong. I know everybody wants an open world game, but everyone wants an open world game until you have the problem you have with Scarlet and Violet, where the hardware can't handle rendering the map that massive. Not only that, is with Scarlet and Violet, you had 2 to 3 times the number of sprites being rendered at any given point in time all around the map. And so what it's having to do is the game system has to render 50 to 60 sprites, 50 to 60 Pokemon, all on huge swaths of map, and render this huge map. Because remember, there are no load times going into any portion of that map. Yes, maybe sometimes it would have to quickly render out things in the distance, but it rendered out massive swaths of map. And the only time you had load screens is going into a building or going into Area 0. That's pretty much it. You did not have load times aside from that. Maybe you had lag or frame drops or things like that flying into a new area, especially when you got the in the DLC the flying abilities on Miraidon or Koraidon. But the reality is, this looks like it's going to play out a little bit more. Let's go back to the beginning here. A little bit more like Legends, the other Legends game, where you're rendering sections of the map. You're rendering areas. You're not rendering huge, crazy, large pieces of map. And I'll be honest with you, I like that. I think that's better for the hardware. I think that's better for playability. And I think that is going to help alleviate a lot of the frame drop issues and things like that we saw with Scarlet and Violet. That in reality, is going to be so much better for the player, so much better for the hardware, so much better for player enjoyability, and frankly, is going to lead to an all-out better game. Some people have criticized the size of like Onyx here. Here's the thing, guys. I know Onyx can be absolutely just ginormous in other games, especially like Legends, the other Legends game and things like that. They have to render them on screen. I agree with you. It is not necessarily coded to proper size or anything like that. But also, if he was coded to size, an angle like this would be very difficult to pull off. I see the argument. I don't have a legitimate... I don't have any legitimate counterpoint to that. I mean, I think it's a legitimate argument that some of the Pokemon are off model and off size. Not even off model. I think they're on model, but they're definitely not to like their proper scale or whatnot. And I'm with you. I would very much like to see the Pokemon to scale, but also the realistic part of me, it kind of understands that in all likelihood, that would be extremely difficult, if not nigh impossible to pull off. So I'm not going to refute that. I'm just going to say it'd be very difficult, but they've done it. So if that's your hill, if that is where you want to stand on this product, you know what? I will give you that. I cannot refute that. It is just like a bit nitpicky, in my opinion. But if that's your opinion, it's a perfectly legitimate opinion. I'm not going to refute it. Every part of me wants to, but it is a legitimate opinion. The Pokemon do seem to be slightly out of scale, I guess is the way I can put it. Can't wait to see more of Mega Evolutions. Can't wait to see more of this game. I think some of the hate this game has been receiving is very forced. There are some legitimate arguments for it. Yes, some people think it should be on the Switch 2 hardware, and I think it would look prettier on the Switch 2 hardware. I think it's going to play way better on the Switch 2 hardware. I think it's going to have some performance issues, some frame drops, but I think they've done, from what I've seen here, a relatively decent amount to optimize this for the old hardware. So all said and done, basically, in retrospect, now that I've kind of come back from this after a couple of days, I was always very hyped for the game. I was never let down by the trailer. I think there are some things that probably could look prettier, but at the same rate, I'm very happy with some of the decisions they very clearly made, and I think it's going to be a very fun game. The one thing, and I was initially very upset about this, it says it's coming late in 2025, and in reality, I think that's okay, because when it comes to this game specifically, if they're not giving us the remakes, if they're not giving us all that, Champions we don't have a date on yet, and we'll cover all that in its own right. I think, as much as I wanted it earlier, if it takes them time to get it out, get it done right, so we don't have, 47 patches in the first week like we did with Scarlet and Violet. I don't know how many patches we had, but we had a ton of patches. It took them months to get the game right. Please get this game right from launch. We need to get away from this era of games that drop broken and that they say, yes, you paid $60, $70 for this game, we'll fix it later. Unacceptable. It is 2025. We didn't accept that back in the day. If you released a game on cartridge before the days of updating things like that, or even CD, DVD, whatever, and it was broken, it was a bad game. It was just a bad game. And people are now starting to come to call these game companies. I mean, look what happened with Concord and things like that. So they better get this right. They better launch this correctly from the start without tons of updates and without, like us needing to run a bunch of things online or stuff like that. There will be glitches, guys. There's always glitches. I mean, go look at the original games. The original games had tons of glitches. Go look at my video on the 8F glitch on the original Pokemon Red. And it wasn't just on Virtual Console. Like, it's broken on every version of the game up to Fire Red, Leaf Green, and after that they kind of fixed it. But then when they released the Virtual Console, it's still a thing. Like, there will always be glitches, there will always be exploits, there will always be ways to hack the game. What I don't want is the abysmal launch that Scarlet and Violet had, because there are still people that will not play that game, and it is way better now than it was at launch. That game has none of the problems it had at launch. This game, if done right, could be a major W for the Pokemon Company, for Game Freak, and even Nintendo. So I didn't want to wait. I'm okay with waiting if we get a game that launches without any issues. So let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Do you think I missed anything? Do you think I was wrong on anything? You know, go ham on your critiques. Make sure you guys like, share, be civil in the comments. I don't want to see any nasty comments. I want everyone to have a civil discussion, respect each other's opinions. But, you know, if you're going to produce a hot take, be ready to back it up. I do every time. But, you know, we're not all going to agree, but we do need to be civil. And I'll see you guys in the comments. Subscribe, and we'll be back for more Pokemon everything soon.